Yes, first and foremost, I'd like to say that we at Fayette County Public Schools are very thankful for the opportunity to have advocates in our school district. We started last school year with an Arabic interpreter advocate and a multilingual African refugee advocate as well, for working with our students through a grant that was awarded to us. The selection process of who would we select to work with our students and our staff was something that we wanted somebody who was already in-house working with our students, working with our staff, working with our parents. And because I coordinate the interpreter team, I have a lot of contact with all of our interpreters at the district level. And I always get feedback from teachers about, you know, such and such interpreter did a great job, or such and such interpreter really connects with the families. The students really like the way he's working with them. And that is how we selected interpreters who would be able to serve as a refugee advocate. We also checked their background, you know, what they've been doing in the past other than Fayette County schools, what their education levels were and stuff like that. And we selected 2 of those interpreters, an Arabic speaking and an African refugee advocate, to work with students, staff, and parents last school year. That program worked out very well. So much that principals, once the program ended, principals started contacting our superintendent, because we weren't sure we were getting that grant again for the following school year, this one that we just finished. And principals started contacting superintendent, and they said, we really want these advocates to come back and work with their students. They made a difference. They had such an impact in our students and our staff that we want them back. So that opened the opportunity. They did come back. We were awarded the grant again. They did come back, but that also opened the opportunity for us to add additional advocates. The highest spoken ELL language in our school district is Spanish, and therefore we, Ms. Lori Boeing, or we at the district level, they decided that we needed to add Spanish advocates to our school district. The same selection process took place, you know, people who have been with our district for a certain number of years, people who really do connect with students, with parents, and with staff, and they are working. They opted for selecting like a feeder pattern. So they're working with Mary Todd, Northern Elementary, Bryan Station Middle, Wimburn Middle. And we do not have, for Spanish, we do not have a high school. But all in all, we're covering a lot of our schools, or quite a good range of schools. We have a high refugee student enrollment. Lansdowne, Southern, Tates Creek Elementary and Tates Creek High, Southern Middle, and then the others that I already mentioned. What these people are doing at the district level is they're working not only with the staff, but they are working with the students and oftentimes with the parents. As a former ELL student myself, it is always easier for me as a student to talk, to chit chat, to ask for help from someone who looks like me, from someone who speaks my language. Up to date as a grown-up, whenever I'll go, you know, to a store or somewhere and I find somebody that looks like me, for whatever reason, it's like my comfort zone. I know they look like me. I know they'll speak my language. I know they'll understand what I'm trying to say. And so when our students started seeing these advocates at their schools, offering tutoring programs after school, offering a reading club after school, and hey, they speak Arabic, or hey, they speak Swahili, I want to be a part of that. You don't see a lot of that at the schools. And this was new, and this was very motivational for our students. So our advocates district-wide are working at elementary, middle, and high school levels in multiple ranges. We've had parent programs to increase parent involvement at the schools, educating the parents of the programs different Fayette County schools offer. Different Fayette County schools offer. Everybody offers different programs, after school activities and such. But it's involving assistance and support to the students, to the parents, and to the families. And these advocates are not only advocating for the families and the students, but they're also like a facilitator. They're in between, helping everybody work together, and like Basel said at the beginning, making sure that all means all. Everybody is included.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
So like Jessica said, the mission of Fayette County Public Schools is to create a collaborative community that ensure all students achieve at high levels and graduate prepared to excel in global society. To meet this goal, we will provide excellent student opportunities, excellent staff, excellent schools, excellent supports, and excellent relationships. This mission statement was updated and revised last in 2017 when the district came out with the 2017-2021 strategic plan to expect excellence. The emphasis here is that the mission is to ensure this for all students, students who are identified for special ed, students who qualify for free reduced price meals, students who are experiencing homelessness, English language learner students, refugee students, and immigrant students. All means all. And this is where, like, hopefully we come. Now, some of you might say, how big is the student population? Since the passage of the Refugee Act in 1980, the United States has admitted more than 3 million refugees and granted asylum status to over 721,000 individuals. Now, despite recent shift in immigration policy under the current administration, which caused a big decrease in number of admitted refugees, I believe it was 30,000 last year, it's supposed to be like 18,000 this year, and this is the cap. But the state of Kentucky continues to be a leader here. As you can see, at the close of fiscal year 2019, which is from October 1st, 2018 to September 30th, 2019, Kentucky ranked 5th in the nation in the number of refugee arrivals compared to other states. Kentucky had 1,427 refugee settlers. The numbers in the chart are rounded. And by contrast, the District of Columbia, Delaware, and West Virginia each resettled fewer than 10 refugees. Hawaii and Wyoming took in no refugees at all in fiscal 2019. Now, how is this reflected in Fayette County Public Schools? In the academic year 2018-2019, Fayette County had a total student enrollment of 42,087 students, while English language learners were 6,818 students, or 16% of the student population. Now, of course, not all English language learner students are refugees and or immigrants, and not all refugees and or immigrants are English language learners, but this helps give us a general idea. And by the way, while like researching some of the data, I learned that in English language learner students, there was a 21% increase in number of students meeting proficiency goals and exiting the English language learners program in the 18-19 academic year. This is the most recent published annual report for the school district, and this is something to celebrate. This is something that shows the commitment of the school district to these students. Now let's talk about specifics. What does providing these excellent opportunities and supports mean? First, excellent student opportunities. We're talking here about opportunities for academic support, for behavioral modeling, for social skills and knowledge building. The school is not just a place we go to learn at, it's a local community in and of itself, where we experience all aspects of life, making sure that our students gain the knowledge, skills, grit, and tools to succeed in it is essential, because this is what prepares them to be successful in their day-to-day life. Those opportunities aren't limited to the school day itself either. While in school, as part of the refugee advocate role, I've provided tutoring, academic, and social emotional support in one-on-one and in small group settings to students. Sometimes students were identified to have like knowledge gaps where they would benefit from working with the refugee advocate weekly, so they were on a schedule where they received direct support on a weekly basis. Sometimes that looked like going to the classroom with the student or students, and sometimes that meant them being pulled out to come work with me, like when they go to receive intervention and or special education services. The mode of delivery is always based on the student's individual level and need, that in coordination with their teachers, of course. Some other times this meant that students simply knew that I'd be available on a certain day, at a certain time, in a certain location. Same one every week, where they can come to me for academic support in all classes and subjects. And not just academic support, obviously, anything they need help with. Now, some other times this took place after school, whether that's via school tutoring programs like ESS in the middle and high schools, or via encouragement to parents to make sure they're enrolled their elementary school kids in after-school care programs like KRIIS. These programs usually cost money, after-school care like KRIIS, but families who receive government supports like SNAP, etc., they can qualify for waivers. So making sure that parents know their options, making sure they have the help filling out the registration paperwork, etc., meant that families wouldn't miss on these wonderful opportunities for their children. For the middle school I was at, they didn't have an after-school tutoring program dedicated to refugee students, and we started that together that year. And for the high school, they did have one, but participation increased significantly once parents were contacted to be informed of its existence, and students were reminded weekly of it. Plus, the number of adults in the room went up from only one DL teacher to 3 usually, with me and the other refugee advocates in Fayette Creek High School both staying and participating in it. Now, like everything else in life, the COVID-19 pandemic changed our plans, but it didn't change our determination to keep providing those services to students. So direct support to students and families continued during NTI on Zoom, Google Meets, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, FaceTime, you name it. If it's free and you can use it to talk to someone, chances are we've used it during NTI. As some people know, Fayette County didn't have established NTI plans before this pandemic because of the concern that NTI is not a level playing field and would exacerbate knowledge and learning gaps between students. A very valid concern. The first few weeks were challenging. Parents and students were being asked to join classes, do all sorts of assignments, and work on various apps, but some of them didn't even know how to turn a computer on, how to log into their email. Some didn't even know how to type in their email. One time I was live on FaceTime teaching a student how to type the password for the Zoom meeting because they didn't even know where the dot on the keyboard is, how to type at, since you have to press shift and 2 together, and that you don't leave a space between your first and last name when you type in your school email in order to sign in to your Chromebooks and turn it on. You know what though? Those first few weeks, they were like an intensive technology boot camp for our students and families. They're much more tech literate now. Of course, some still have a long way to go, but I'll take that with very proudly. We also coordinated for paper packets delivery and pickup for some families who opted to do their work that way, or for those who this was the only feasible way for them to do it due to accessibility and health limitations. Of course, learning doesn't stop in the summer. Some of the summer programs I was involved in supported, including supporting 4 days refugee adventures camp at the elementary school. Students from different backgrounds were invited, but eventually all 28 students who attended were Arabic speakers due to the push we did to invite parents directly and reaching out to them via their preferred methods of communication. More on that later. And this year with social distancing and the way the second half of the year went because of COVID, the EL department and I launched a virtual summer language and reading support program where 16 elementary students and 5 middle schoolers were identified as needing to continue to work to close the knowledge and skills gap. And those students will be contacted twice a week, once to receive 30-minute session to work on reading a language using Baskets and ReadWorks platforms, and once to check in on them and to encourage support the district summer bridge program on Imagine Learning platforms. Some other summer programs included supporting a 4-week summer literacy camp with some awesome field trips, supporting an adventure and resilience camp for boys rising to 5th grade, and a big one is also summer school for credit recovery for high schoolers. My first year acting as a refugee advocate, we had a 300% increase in the number of students signing up for in-person classes. Some signed up for more than one class, and all of them passed all of the in-person summer courses they signed up for that year. Now, in addition to programs directly planned or supported by the schools themselves and the refugee advocate, there's a big focus on students taking advantage of programs, services, and opportunities offered at the school or the community level. Our students and families sometimes might not know of these programs or of their benefits. For example, the school district hosts an event multiple times a year called Family University. Sometimes it's held in partnership with community partners like the Urban League of Lexington. These programs are very beneficial, but sometimes under-advertised. To my knowledge, none of my refugee high schoolers have participated in them before joining the school. We talked about it together, and 6 of my Arabic club members ended up attending the first one after starting there. This program consists of multiple very informative workshops, and that one had a focus on college preparedness and readiness. There was this award where you can win a $1,000 college scholarship. The deadline had passed already by the time we talked about it, and the students weren't aware of its existence even. Again, big problem number 1, information gap. But we went there. We asked if he can make a late submission. We were told yes. He recorded the video on a cell phone in an empty classroom where he talked about how college education would affect him personally, his family, and his community. And guess what? He won that $1,000 scholarship. Our refugee and immigrant students face many challenges. Access to information is a big one, and a big focus of ours is to overcome this. Under this program, refugee students' participation was facilitated in other community resources too, like the Minority Business Expo and BizTown. And of course, all these programs aim to teach you skills and tools to excel in real life. But what a better tool for that than real life experience itself? And this is why we also focused on employment and volunteerism. We reviewed resumes, submitted job applications together, we practiced interview. We also discussed volunteering in and outside the school. Two of my high school seniors this year became teacher aides, and about 5-6 members of my Fayette Creek High School Arabic Club, they were actually in the process of like onboarding to volunteer with KRM before the COVID-19 started. We were trying to launch a partnership with their youth mentoring program. Shout out Lizzie and Eric. And hopefully, like once all these restrictions will be lifted, we'll be able to continue working on that. We also made sure that students were aware of school-based paths and programs like the IB programs at Fayette Creek, Fayette County's Seal of Biliteracy for dual language speakers, and college and financial aid session. Again, information gap. Plenty of students weren't even aware of those services and resources. This is similar to the thousands of college scholarships that go unclaimed each year because people simply aren't aware of them. Like sometimes no one applied for them. And if you apply, just you, I mean, you'll get it. There certainly can be more work and help offered to refugee and immigrant students, but sometimes even existing programs are underutilized due to this information gap and the lack of access. And this is something we're working on. So this is all part of the programs and efforts that we were doing to focus on providing excellent student opportunities for our students. Well, how about excellent staff? The second vehicle of excellence is excellent staff. And last year we participated in 3 staff trainings where we held panels about refugee students and families' experiences. These panels included refugee students, current and recent graduates, refugee parents, us, the refugee advocates, and specialized professionals like school social workers, family resource center coordinators, and representatives from KRM actually. Hey, Jessica and Lizzie. So the 3 trainings were designed to encapsulate almost all of our school staff. The SLI, the Superintendent Leadership Institute for Principals and Administrators, the Teachers Learning Conference, TLC, for teachers, and the English Language Learner Teacher Summer Training. And there were 2 big focuses in these trainings. First-hand account of refugee experiences and challenges. And that all means all. Because sometimes we think that refugee and immigrant students, they live in their own like refugee and EL island. If they need help, they need resources, if they need anything, we send them to the people who are like expert in their circumstances, AKA usually the EL teacher. But you know what? Like if an EL teacher turned into a quasi caseworker or like a quasi social worker for these students, then like who's teaching these kids English? A college coach should be a college coach for all students. A family resource center coordinator is a family resource center coordinator for all students. And a math teacher is a math teacher for all students. Now, again, this is usually done with the best of intentions. Let me point the student in a direction where people are more accustomed to and more aware of their sensibilities. But this is not the way to go about it. We want these students to be able to seek all available resources to them in the way those resources were designed to. Often they're the one doing this on behalf of their parents and their families in their day-to-day life. So teaching them this actually holds double benefit. The whole give a person a fish and you feed them for a day, teach a person to fish and you feed them for a lifetime. So we want to guide those students. We want to offer them the tools so they can seek the resources themselves. Additionally, we were working on increasing cultural awareness for school staff. This includes things like familiarizing cafeteria staff about halal meat and possible cultural and religious dietary restrictions. The food kids eat at school sometimes can be the only or the biggest meal of their day. And sometimes students would go hungry because they're not certain whether they can eat a certain food or not. Common example of this include like turkey hot dogs. This always confuses my kids. And food that may contain gelatin, which can include trace of pork products. Another example is religious holidays and costumes. Each year, I send a school-wide email to all staff before the beginning of the month of Ramadan, explaining what this means to the students and what changes they might observe. We always talk about bridging the culture gap. Culture is a bridge. The reason we say this is that it's one of the strongest points people can bond on. One time a librarian approached me. She told me this story about how she'd always see a couple of students hanging around the library, very sweet, always polite and courteous, and she'd always wanted to like approach them, but they looked different. They sounded different. And she wasn't really sure how to start the conversation. They happened to be there a little after she received that email. So she approached one of them and she asked her whether this sounded about right, whether this was representative of her experience. And the student said, yeah. And they had a lengthy conversation about it and about culture in general. This was the beginning of a very close relationship where they talk often. Fast forward, it was time to apply for college. And that student was applying to colleges without even letting her parents know, because she was concerned they might not let her attend college anyway. So like, why argue if she might not get in? She was confiding in the librarian, talking about it throughout the entire process. Now, thankfully, the story had a very happy ending. The student did get in. The parents, a bit surprised, were very supportive and didn't object to their daughter going to college. But throughout all this very stressful process, that personal relationship was no doubt such an amazing and very necessary support system. And it all started with a conversation. So yes, conversations matter. These personal relationships matter. And I encourage you all to always try and develop and harbor them. And back to the staff part, the last piece of the puzzle is, the refugee advocate ourselves, having this point of contact in the school where students and parents know that they can rely on this person. Like Jessica said, they can come to school, they can see someone that looks like them, that understand them, that comes from the same culture, and they know like this person is going to be at school on Monday, every Monday. So this helped families a lot, and I really urge all of you, if you can have people like this in your organizations, representation does matter. This moved us on to the third vehicle, the schools. How do we help our students attend excellent school? This starts from the ground up. Help with enrollment, help with filling out paperwork, advertising and participating in school-wide orientation nights with parents and students, holding our own smaller orientation nights too at each one of the schools, bridging that information gap that we talked about, making sure families knows about special and alternative special ed programs, alternative programs, gifted and talented programs, extracurricular, sports team, bond, making sure they have better understanding of those tiered interventions, of schools' expectations, graduation requirements. Something as simple as making sure like they understand the credit system in high school. Plenty of countries don't do that. And some, like often parents aren't familiar with it. Same with like standardized testing, access, MAP, tests like MAP that use a percentile score. There's always a big confusion about like, what does a percentile score mean? Even simpler stuff, like you'd be surprised how uncertain some parents be at the end of the school year about whether their kids had passed or failed and whether they're going on to the next grade level or not. So communication is key. And this is the one I want to focus on because it really encompasses a lot of the other things and is usually a key barrier for our students and families. We have a dedicated interpreting and translation department in the school district that Ms. Sanchez leads. Everyone there goes above and beyond to make sure that information is relayed to families. But schools simply can't translate everything. And sometimes things fall through the cracks. Some less important, quote unquote, documents might sometimes not be sent for translation, like dress codes. We know how to dress, registration and enrollment forms for like non-essential extracurriculars or after school community programs, surveys, things like that. But I, as a student, already feel singled out and like a stranger sometimes. And now I find myself in a position where I'm sitting in the front office, waiting for my parent to come to give me like a change of clothes because apparently I can't wear a hoodie to school. But why? Like I thought hoodies are a staple American article of clothing. Like this is just overwhelming. Like I don't understand anything about the school system. Or now I, as a student, I'm missing an after school experience I already lacked. This might be something I have never experienced before. I may never have an experience, in the future to do it. And that's simply because when my parents looked at the letter and they saw that bold like $15 number, they couldn't afford it. But they didn't understand that sentence at the end that said, you can still participate even if you can't afford to pay. This is why part of our roles too is try and translate as much as possible all these documents that sometimes may like fall through the cracks, dress codes, registration and survey forms for like reading recovery program, car writers procedures, PTA enrollment and volunteering opportunities, dental screening programs, etc. And of course, sometimes the best way to contact a parent is to do so directly. Due to all what's mentioned before, some families don't even bother checking school paperwork. I mean, on my kitchen table, I have this letter from the utility company or the scary IRS. So like, which one's gonna take priority here? You always wanna contact parents via their preferred way of communication. Lots of families have a limited number of calls a minute or text messages. So like they prefer one or the other. Sometimes they have limited both. So they preferred WhatsApp. Of course, forget about email contacts. In my experience, if you've been in this country for less than 3-4 years, and email wasn't something you've used before, 99% chance no one read your email or got your message. Sometimes you also have to be mindful of the time of day you call or contact parents. This may, because I mean, they might be working night shifts. They might have younger kids who can't enroll in preschool. And this has worked wonders for us when it came to parents and participation in parent-teacher conferences. We had like a close to like 9,500% for some grade, for certain grade levels last year during this approach. It's usually not as high for regular after-school parents' night, but sometimes the difference is just too obvious. Like Jessica said, this position is grant funded, so sometimes there can be interrupted funding, unfortunately. But this actually gives you like a window to do a very like non-scientific research. One time we sent invitations and communications for curriculum nights for certain grades during like the grant period. And 13 out of 19 families attended that curriculum night. And then another curriculum night for 2 different grade levels at the end of October, where due like the funding structure, the position was temporarily not working in school, 0 Arabic refugees families attended that other curriculum night. Another example is that in one of the schools, they take the children every year during the winter on a clothing trip where they can get some clothes. And this year, out of 35 spots, 7 Arabic-speaking refugee students participated in that trip. This was in comparison to a grand total of 0 the previous year. The fourth vehicle here is excellent supports. We talked a bit about supporting during like the NTI transition, making sure families get the help and resources in the school itself through like the family resource and youth service centers. They do a wonderful job. They're all staffed by wonderful people, but not always families know about these programs. Not always families know how to approach the family resource centers. So again, bridging that gap, being that link, helping families. I mean, we've really helped families with like COVID-19 resources, unemployment, rent, EBT programs, meal distributions, clothing trip, unfortunately, even like a domestic abuse case. Really like once parents know that there's a person I can reach out to help, the options are like really infinite. Also helping students and families link with physical and mental health resources. This helped with increased immunization compliance, health screening, referring students to counseling services in and outside school, making sure students have school supplies, have books to start their own like home libraries. Back to that, having that contact person in school that families know and feel comfortable coming to. And this obviously doesn't have to be in a school only. This can be in a legal clinic. This can be in a organization that help families and get resources. Seeking help is hard. And culturally, in a lot of cultures, seeking help is frowned upon. And so having this person who understands you, having this person who you can confide in, facilitate this process a lot. Last and not least, we seek to have excellent relationships in school. This is on two front, students' relationships and parents' relationships. For students, there's the social skill and cultural awareness part that we talked about that would help them build friendships and relationships with peers from different backgrounds. But then there's like the harboring and strengthening the relationship amongst themselves too. Help them create a local community, a support system of sort. Sometimes we assume that students with similar backgrounds or ones who speak the same language, I mean, they'd naturally be friends. I mean, what if they're from different countries at wars with each other? What if they're from different tribes, different religious sects? We need to be mindful of those circumstances. This is why you got to work on building personal relationships that's actually personal. It's not simply about coming from the same place or speaking the same language. I mean, mainly, you know, like when we're here, we're not super close to all our neighbors. Now, I might go on a cruise ship and see a neighbor I don't usually talk to. Obviously, like we'll go and like bond together and hey, like how are you and whatnot. But what if they're like that annoying neighbor who keeps throwing their yard waste into your own yard? Probably not going to be excited as much to like see them. So imagine that for more serious issues. This is why we work on building student relationships through clubs and programs. Some of the programs we initiated, District High School, now we have an Arabic club that meets once a week. We sometimes have community guests, and we had people from KRM, again, Eric and Lizzie. They were kind enough to come talk with my students, explain KRM's missions and services, and we were working on building that reciprocal relationship that hopefully we will continue to do. At Southern Middle, last year we had an academic leadership class where all Arabic refugee students would come during the first period and have their AL class together with me once a week. And then at Lansdowne, we sometimes did a lunch bunch where students would come in small groups and eat their lunches with me, especially during times like Ramadan, where some kids might like want to avoid going to the cafeteria. For parents, this looked like holding a lot of parents' nights, making sure parent-teacher conferences participation is high, increasing the number of parent-teacher conferences in middle and high school, because they're not like scheduled normally like in elementary school. You actually have to request them, and parents aren't always aware of that. We usually give out surveys at those parents' nights, and at one of the biggest one, on a scale from 1 to 10, like how much do you rate this night? I mean, we got an average of 9.3. The most common suggestion was doing this more often. So like if you offer these programs to parents, they do want to take advantage of it. Same with getting them more involved in the school community, PTA, volunteering. This past year, we had 4 parents participate as volunteers in a PTA event. We had 2 start volunteering for lunch duty in the elementary school, and one of them actually ended up getting hired in the after-school program. So we talked so far about the 5 vehicles that we're working on to offer to our students: excellent students opportunities, excellent staff, excellent support, excellent relationships. Some of the other advocates programs who unfortunately couldn't like participate with us, they were working on weekly parent session where they offered childcare to make sure everyone could attend, after school programs, ESS tutoring programs, help with enrollment, proctoring and tutoring for state testing and all that. We were supposed now, like after talking about all of this, I wanted a more personal experience. So one of my middle school students was supposed to talk with us, but unfortunately, like he just texted me a little while ago and said he had an emergency and he won't be able to participate. But at the end, we'll listen to a pre-recorded audio message from a senior in high school. But this student, Ali, the one who was supposed to talk with us, I knew Ali for a few years now. I first met him at District Elementary when I was working with them as the refugee school liaison, and just seeing like how much he's grown since then, how he became a leader. He's almost out of the EL program. Like this is why we do what we do. Once your students have the opportunities and the tools and means to succeed, the sky is literally the limit. Now, after talking about like some of the specific steps and programs that we've been doing in Fayette County as refugee advocates, I want to like take a step back. I want to talk a little bit about the school environment, about what goes on in the minds of our students, about trying the type of education we want to provide to our students. It's my belief that this education needs to be trauma-informed. Many of us have heard of the term trauma-informed care in the context of healthcare, but education is no different. We need to provide a trauma-informed education. This past week, when I was like starting to think about what I'm gonna say today, basically, I was hanging out with a couple of friends, sharing some old stories over the weekend, and one of them talked about the time she broke her leg while traveling in Australia. She talked about how basically she started sobbing in the hospital because it was just all too much. She was in a different country, everything around her was different, and on top of that, this happened, and now she had to deal with it. And I found that story very relatable. I believe many of us who had the luxury to leisurely travel had to deal with this. I mean, maybe not exactly a broken leg, maybe you got sick, maybe a lost luggage, maybe a broken one-of-a-kind souvenir, hopping on the wrong bus, ending at the wrong end of town. The key word here is we were traveling leisurely. So this made me think of growing up in Syria, we had this folk saying that you can't carry more than one watermelon at a time. It's just too hard. You'll trip, they'll fall, something will happen, you'll end up with a broken watermelon in the street, and no one wants that to happen. I mean, look at this guy. This guy, he managed to carry two. He picked them small, he was smart. Now, can you imagine if this guy is a refugee student and each one of those juicy watermelons is a stressor? How many do you think he can safely carry? First, you have the trauma of pre-migration and resettlement experiences. Let's consider these two, the original watermelons the kid is carrying here. Refugee students may have been exposed to violence, hunger, lack of necessities, possibly detention and torture, definitely home displacement. Some might not be here with their entire families, definitely not their entire friend and social support groups. And often you see them worrying about friends and relatives they left behind when bad news from previous countries they lived in reached them. Now let's add to those watermelons, let's add the stressors of the acculturation process. Let's add the stressor of discrimination. Many kids experience discrimination once entering US schools. They don't look the same, they don't sound the same, their names even don't sound the same. And it's not like some kids even need an excuse to like bully and pick on you, unfortunately. Now, let's add the stressor of most refugees' families often resettle in high poverty crime areas. This adds an exacerbate to all these stressors. So how are you gonna carry all those stressors with you? According to the National Association of School Psychologists, trauma affects school functioning. Extreme stress, adversity, and trauma can impede concentration, cognitive functioning, memory, and social relationship. And additionally, stress can contribute to both internalized symptoms such as hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, grief, fear, anger, isolation, and externalized behaviors such as like a startle response, reactivity, aggression, conduct problems. This is why trauma-informed education is key. Honestly, like some of us can't even imagine coming to school and like functioning properly without drinking our morning coffee. I mean, I sure can't. Can you imagine like what these kids are doing with all this emotional baggage, with all these watermelons? This leads us to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It states that first, you always need your physiological needs, your food, your water, your shelter and safety. This is where all those supports come from. If your student is hungry because they weren't sure if the cafeteria food have pork in it or not, they won't function well. If they're afraid because they overheard their parents discuss how they may lose the apartment because the father, the only one who worked in the family, lost his minimum wage job because of COVID-19, and they don't know how to navigate the unemployment system, they won't function well in school. Yes, math is important. Yes, language is important. But do you really like expect them to like sit down as a family and try to figure out, okay, like let's see, how do we turn the computer on? How do I open my internet browser? How do I go to my school email and click on that Zoom link to join the Zoom video call? And now I'm getting this, like, do you authorize Zoom to use your camera? Like, this wasn't in like the step-by-step instructions. Like, what does the word authorize even mean? It's just like not high on their priority levels yet. Once you have your physiological needs secured, then you'll need safety, you need protection, you need security. Am I safe in school? Like, this police officer that I'm passing by every day in the hall, is he nice, or is he like the one who tortured my father in the street in front of me? Now, once you have that, once hopefully you feel safe, once you feel secure, then you need to have your sense of belonging. You need to feel loved. Does my teacher love me, or like do they think I'm stupid because I can't even answer simple questions? How about my classmates? None of them want to play with me. And when they talk with me, they talk very slowly, like I'm very dumb. And this is where the excellence to staff, excellent schools, excellent supports, this is where it comes all in connection to hopefully make our schools a safe place for those children. Afterward, once you achieve all that, once you feel safe and secured, then you need your esteem. Then you need to feel respected by others and by yourself. And only then you are ready for self-actualization. You are ready to learn. You are ready to achieve at your highest potential. Yes, you may think to yourself, well, I mean, basic math is basic, math is universal. I've explained this information or like that detail quite a few times. And yes, I mean, I even did it in the way my training told me to do it with a student who was like learning the language, who's like new to the country. So like, why are they not getting it? But learning period is not a priority when you're hungry, when you're not sure if you'll sleep in the next bed next month, when you feel like no one loves and understands you. This is why all those supports, they're imperative, and trauma-informed education is essential. Now, to conclude, I want to read a part of a poem by the British poet Warsan Shire. She was born in Kenya to Somali parents, and she captured some of the refugee experience like no one else can. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbor's running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with, who gets you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burned threats into your neck. And even then, you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you wouldn't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten, pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison, because prison is safer than a city of fire. And one prison guard in the night is better than a truckload of men who look like your father. No one could take it. No one could stomach it. No one's skin would be tough enough. I want to play a pre-recorded video of one of our seniors in high school, Mariam. She was hoping to participate live with us, but unfortunately she had other commitments. It's a 5-minute recorded video about her experience when she first started attending school in the United States.
name is Miriam. I am a senior at KRIIS High School. I am from Syria. I lived 3 years in Jordan after I left Syria. And then I came to the United States. I lived 4 years in Chicago and then moved to Kentucky. I came to the United States as a refugee. I started school after a couple of weeks later. I faced so many different problems, especially with speaking and understanding the language and doing schoolwork. Schools in the United States are very different from my country. I really like schools. The positive experience I had is from the first day I had the chance to get to know a very good friend who helped me from the first day and explained everything to me, even though I wasn't understanding what she's saying. And she explained what the classes we're taking and what classes are we going to take, which is the most important thing for a new student. Uh, it, uh, it would make me feel more comfortable to know that someone can help me and I get the help whenever I need it. Like math club after school, I depend on it when my teacher has meeting and can help me, and for other classes tutoring too. I also had a positive experience with my history teacher at KRIIS High School. He's a really good teacher. I am really a lucky person to have the chance to know a teacher like him. He teach very well and clear and simple to understand, to the point that I would be able to take a test after his lesson and I would pass. He's a really good teacher. I really appreciate him and I hope I would have him next year too. But the negative experience I had is dealing with my speech teacher in sophomore year, who were a really hard class to take. While I am learning English and French, and while also I am dealing with other difficult classes. In that class, we had to read, summarize, memorize, and act. It was super hard to take that class for me. So I went to the counselor and explained to her. But the teacher told the counselor that he believed that I can do it, but I kept telling her that it is very hard and will affect my other classes' grade. She told me she would see. After a couple days, she get back to me, tell me that for some reason I can't change the class because of school rules. I wasn't sure if it was really because of the school rules or because the teacher really wanted me to be in his class. But in the end, it was one of the reasons that makes me agree to move from the state and to another school, even though I really like the school. I hope other students won't experience what I had experienced. It doesn't matter the reason. In the end, moving and getting too used to know new things is very hard and not easy at all. Thank you all for listening to me.
And thank you, Mariam. Mariam is one of the smartest, most wonderful students I am fortunate of knowing. Mariam's was hoping to get into a full IB program in Tate Creek High. Unfortunately, due to her moving to Chicago, some of like the information gap we talked about, different requirements between different school districts, she didn't have the prerequisite to go the full IB program track, but she is taking a lot of IB classes. Her current GPA for this term was 4.125, and her rolling cumulative GPA throughout high school is 4.0. And so Miriam is another one of many examples that if you have the tools, if you have the supports, the sky is the limit.
Wow, thank you so much for giving us that example. I really appreciate you bringing the student voice into this. Even though they couldn't be here, you still provided it. So I really appreciate that. We need to wrap up here in a few minutes. I wanted to kind of scroll back through the chat box here. There were a few questions. The first one that I noticed was, let's see. Do you have statistics of how many families that you work with each year?
So for me, as the Arabic refugee advocates, you know, like our families, they kind of come back and forth, but they like change apartments a lot. Some of them like still in the process where they're not in a permanent home, so they move to different cities or different states. But the numbers in my 3 schools for Arabic students in Lansdowne, usually it's between 55 to 60 students. In Tate Creek High, it's been between about 27, 28 to 30, 35 students. And in Southern Middle, it's been about 10 to like 15, 16 students on average. And this is since March 2019. Because when I first started with the school district, there was a ton of refugee families coming recently to the country, enrolling in schools. Unfortunately, with the current administration policy and certain laws and restrictions about the countries that people come from, this decreased the number of the Arabic speaking newcomers. So this is mainly still the student population that came especially around like 2014, 2015, 2016, and 17. And about the numbers of Spanish-speaking English language learners and African students, I don't have those numbers. I'm not sure if Jessica would, and if not, I'd be happy to like research it and send them to you later.
And there's another question that Jessica made.
I think Jessica may be trying to like answer, though.
Yeah, I have unmuted. Go ahead.
Yes, I do not have numbers, but we can get those via Marta Rodriguez in ELO.
Right. There's another question you may be able to address. Is there any training for frontline staff, like front office personnel, on identifying languages of English language learners?
Not that I participated in my role. I'm not sure if Jessica, as like the district level, would know.
Not to my knowledge, but that is a great idea for future implementation as we at the district level provide trainings to all the registrars, all the receptionists, everybody. So that's a that I'm jotting down for future reference, and hopefully we can move forward.
Right. When there are, what is it, 66 schools now? It's hard to get that implemented, but we can try.
And I know part of like the hope when we started, because again, like right now, since all of like those roles, whether that's me, whether it's the other refugee advocates who work with students who are originally from African countries, or the like Spanish English language learners, like all of these positions are grant funded, so they're like a little bit limited in the scope of and locations of where they can work. But the hope is, hopefully with time, if this turned into a more centralized, like district-wide thing, then those like centralized district training programs can hopefully take effect.
Right. One last question before we go. An employee with the schools, Kiwi Figs, was asking, could the reminder about cultural awareness be sent to all schools for the counselors, social workers, and FRISCs?
I'm sure this can be arranged. Jessica, what would be like the proper personnel to reach out?
Yeah. Yes.
That's probably Doug.
Doug and Sherry, I forgot her last name, at IAKSS. They coordinate trainings for Friskies. And
Sharika maybe as well.
yes.
Yes.
We may want to reach out to them.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for attending yet another session. We have one last session today. We're going to take a quick break, and then our last session will start at 1:45. And if you will humor me for a moment, I would just like to give a quick shout out to Nabil and Muna joining us from New Hampshire, some former students of mine. It's really good to see them. So thank you so much. And I will see you all at 1:45.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you guys.